this beautiful home that I was creating, but it was about those people walking in and going, okay, I made the best choice to ask for help. I mean, being in a just really violent household and having my mother not leave and take us to a safe place. A lot of what goes on out there in the world is people don't want to ask for help. They feel like it's a weakness. Change is very difficult for most humans. We get really stuck in our patterns. I was struggling in my corporate job. I was trying to belong there, and don't worry about what that answer is, they show up. But what I did come from is I knew that when I walked into those shelters that everybody has something extra in their house that they can donate. Could be a spatula, could be a plant, whatever it is, everybody has something. So we started the organization really, I mean, I've always stayed super in the focus of recycling. It is going to have challenges, but those challenges can be overcome if you have the tools. If we don't give them the tools, let's just say they have a friend that needs a resource, their family needs help. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I know my daughter's done that. Even in any industry, there's the businesses that are successful and the ones that are not as successful. This is no different in the shelter industry. There are shelters out there that I definitely would love them to change. Just like good and evil. We have both sides, yin and yang, anything you want to call it.
In today's episode of Stories Within podcast, we have Teresa Valley, a passionate advocate for social change and founder of non-profit organizations Girls Giving Back and Be Kind 5. Teresa is fostering a culture of kindness and compassion in a world that often seems divided. Through Girls Giving Back, she's dedicated to supporting local shelters and driving positive change via innovative, community-driven projects. Her leadership and vision have been key in uniting people and nurturing a sense of social responsibility. With a focus on making a tangible difference, Teresa's work is inspiring others to join her movement. As a strong community leader, Teresa is also always eager to empower youth through her initiatives, helping shape the next generation of change makers. We are thrilled and absolutely honored to have Teresa share her journey, insights, challenges, and story behind Girls Giving Back with us today. Hi Teresa.
Hi.
Welcome to Stories Within podcast. It's an absolute pleasure, and I'm really thankful that you're here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
So when I first learned about your organization, I was completely thrilled, because this is not something that people do every day. Like your organization, it was completely different. So the organization is called Girls Giving Back. So I would like to start from there, and I would like you to explain to us, what does Girls Giving Back do?
Yes, so I started Girls Giving Back in 2009. And with the purpose of really changing the feeling of asking for help, but in this particular environment, which is a shelter, which houses families, some youth, adults that are asking for help. So I really wanted to put my energy towards that feeling of that environment and how we set up our homes. And if people are going into a shelter, if they can then feel that same energy that we put into our homes, how that can shift how they can recover from whatever crisis they're going through. And then obviously move on to being, back into the world where they feel like where they belong again. And I think when people ask for help in shelters, it's a very difficult circumstance. And so, really working with the community and bringing youth in to design these homes for families and youth, domestic violence and otherwise issues out in the community. So it was just a passion of, partly just being creative and designing something beautiful. We all love our home to feel and look beautiful. So that's kind of where it started.
It's absolutely incredible what you're doing, like making them feel at home. It's something, I think it's a very unconventional idea that you've gotten. So just trying to understand what you do more for these. So you take a particular shelter and then you help
creating some art pieces for them, or
Yeah, so
what exactly
we
do you do?
basically take the whole interior of a shelter and redesign it. Depending, I mean, some shelters come to me when they are building the shelter, and then I am able to work with them on design of the interior spaces. But in the end, my role as with Girls Giving Back has always been to furnish the spaces. Which when I say that, I mean procure everything that goes into the space, so the shelter does not have to incur that cost. My goal is always to bring in the community donors, and which I mean furniture donors, things that go into any house, like into your kitchen. There's a lot of details that go into these spaces. So what my whole goal is always to have the shelter have that kind of savings so that they can put it into the caseworkers, the social workers, the tutors for the kids, anything that helps the individual recover, which is, is an expense for that shelter organization. So yes, we also have, as you can see behind me, art, that beautiful artists, local youth and adult artists do art for the walls, which I think has been a really beautiful piece even from the start. And the reason why, I mean, the first shelter I walked into, I mean, the walls were very blank, and I was like, even just a blank wall can be just it feels very sterile and doesn't have a lot of feeling to it if the wall doesn't have any beautiful art on it. And so that's really where it started bringing in my daughter and her friends at age 9, because not all youth love to do art, but many do. And my daughter was a wonderful artist. She still is a wonderful artist. So that's where that concept came together, and it kind of just blossomed from there. Because our community can be kind of a tight-knit community. I mean, artists know each other and they can share that we're looking for beautiful art for the walls. And so it kind of became this wonderful relationship between artists and the shelters. And because like I say, I mean, if you don't have beautiful things on the walls, it really isn't finished,
Yeah.
So
I agree.
yeah.
I love artworks, and I believe this is something very similar to the one that's been donated to your shelter.
Yes.
Yeah, this is by a wonderful artist, and
Yes.
This is really nice. This brings that touch, the
Right,
personal touch.
and it's just a wonderful way to involve the community, to basically say, here's a need. We've, over the last 15 years, we've had so many beautiful pieces of art donated. I mean, I would say that's probably my favorite part of the project. The finale of finishing a space is this beautiful artwork that's been created by local artists. And, we can, they can always look back at those pictures that I post about the finished project, and they can see that they donated, and that a piece of them is on the wall, but also just the impact of when people walk into a space and see that the community donated that art. It's been really special. I mean, I would say that many of the humans, we'll call them, that go into the shelters for help, always ask if they could take the art with them when they move on to their more permanent housing. And the shelter will reach out, and I was like, absolutely, have them take that art. We can always put more art on the walls. If that's what they're connected to, I want their next home space to have that in there, if that is what made them feel good, so.
Oh, that's wonderful. So have you seen the impact of the decorating the space, revamping the space? Have you seen that impact of that in the people who stay there, and what do they think about?
Well, the reason why I continued doing this work back in 2009, because I didn't think it was going to be a long-term thing. I thought it would just be a 1 or 2 projects with my daughter and her friends and my family and friends. But one of the social workers that was in the shelter working convinced me to come to another shelter. And that person, her name was Anita. She's kind of one of those people. She's passed now, and she's my angel now. But she basically was the one that told me that how important this work was, and that she just didn't feel like I should just stop at the first shelter, that I should keep going. And so she showed me this next shelter, and basically she would after every project I would do, she would send me an email with all the details of the reaction of the family that would walk in or the individual that would walk into the shelter space. She would send me a full detail. I still have a lot of these emails, by the way, because they're so special. And she would tell me their exact reaction. Sometimes she'd tell me a little bit about why they were in the shelter in the first place, which was always really hard to hear, like that type of story. But at the same time, also beautiful that they asked for help and were getting wonderful support from this shelter, and that they could walk into one of our spaces and experience. And that's really what really made me really continue down this path, because when the social worker was telling me, not only did it impact that person and the family, because we're pretty detailed in the shelter work we do. I mean, we're down to, if I know how old the kids are, I mean, they have clothing, their size, weighting, new pajamas, toys, their age, books that they would like to read, school supplies. So it is, and to me, that is to be able to have a parent walk into a space with their child and they've left a tough situation and ask for help, to have their child be excited to be there was what really sparked me. And like hearing those stories from Anita about that impact, but also how it impacted the social workers, because they realized when the families walked into the space, their reaction of safety and like feeling good about their choice changed how much easier it was for the social worker to motivate and to help them through all that, the tough times. And so for me, it really was clear that this work was important. It wasn't just about this beautiful home that I was creating or space was creating, the organization of it and all the things, the food in the cabinets that we would bring in, but it was about those people walking in and going, okay, I made the best choice to ask for help. And that was huge for me. I grew up being in a just really violent household and having my mother not leave and take us to a safe place. So hearing those stories was very healing for me, because even though I didn't get that as a child, to see other children getting that, I think is very important to me, that we break that cycle and that those kids, I think that will change that generational pattern, them getting the help they need at a young age and being able to grow up and know that those resources are important, not a sign of weakness, which I think is a lot of what goes on out there in the world, is people don't want to ask for help. They feel like it's a weakness. So, more than anything, I thank Anita all the time. To this day, I'm always like, thanks, Anita, for guiding me into this direction, which I would never have thought I would end up in, to be able to spark that kind of.
That's wonderful. Like when I read about you, even I didn't think of it like this. What I thought was, honestly, I thought, okay, I think people who come in, they might think, oh, this is a safe place, like it looks nice. But I didn't even think that it would make the entire process much easier on them, on all of this, and also the social workers are helping them, and this would take them 1 inch closer to what they have to be.
Right. I think a lot of that conversation is in knowing, and I've had many conversations with social workers over the years now, is that when you want so badly for somebody to believe in themselves and their worth, because that's, a lot of these situations come down to people being abused to the point where they just don't feel their value and their worth. And as a social worker, or anybody that's working with somebody of any age that is trying to help them overcome that, I mean, it's a tough, the person has gone through it, and I can say that from my experience, has to want to make some changes that are in their best interest, but it's hard to make change. Mm-hmm. Change is very difficult for most humans. We get really stuck in our patterns. So to know that, like visually, when we create this visual environment, like in a lot of the shelters, I'll create like a reading room, or what I call like more of a Zen space, calm space for somebody to walk into, and so that they can take, have their time to themselves, read a book or whatever it may be. Just having that to be able to then take steps to take those steps that you need to take to show up differently for yourself and for the world, for your children, or whatever we're trying to accomplish. So, the environments matter. I mean, it's, it just does. And having a house, as when you have kids, even then, when you have a lot of things going on, kids are playing with their toys, or, having, really teaching them that, the reason why we stay organized, because it is a big part of our mental health and how we show up. So I'm very intentional on how, when I put the shelters together, even the office spaces, that there's a space for everything to go, so that it just stays calm. And we can put things behind closed doors. Sometimes we won't have cabinets that are perfectly organized, and I'm fine with that. But as long as we can close those doors and have the room still feel peaceful, is a big thing. Our closets, things get out of control. It's normal. But like I say, when people are coming in from, a chaotic life, they're trying to make change, we need to give them those tools. We need to show them what that looks like. We can't assume, so I'm really clear of the less we put on, yes, I love decor, but we don't need a lot of pieces of decor to make a space, look nice. A couple things, and as when people look at a lot of the photos, because we have a lot of our photos online, there are similarities, and especially in the last shelter I did, because there was 25 units, I didn't want any of the other families to go into another unit and go, well, your space is so much different than mine. I don't want them to be cookie cutter, but I want them to have similar organizational tools, so that, and same with the staff, being able to work in those spaces and show the families.
Thanks. Yeah. Even at home, that's, I think, at least for me, that's the most stressful part, like putting everything away and making it look nice, though you have kids running around.
Right.
That's nice. And also what I really like about this is most of the kids who come in this situation, they wouldn't have seen proper or a nice family. They might not have, they might have had a chance, or they might not have.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
But you giving them that space, like giving them how a safe space would look like. They have things on there. I think that's absolutely wonderful. How did you even? Is it because you shared that you had a difficult childhood?
Yeah.
Is that I'm just trying to understand, what is the entire inspiration behind that? Like, is it from your own experience, or?
I mean, I would say that I always knew that again, coming from, we'll call it what it is, domestic violence, in my past, yes, I had a lot of ideas on what if I went to a shelter as a child, which my mom always told me that they weren't, because I would ask her why we wouldn't leave, and she'd say, well, there's no safe place for us to go, and the shelters are really dirty. The shelters, they had a stigma, we'll call it. And so when I did, this opportunity only happened because I was struggling in my corporate job. I was trying to belong there, and it happened to be tech in this, and I tried many times to fit in. And though I did learn some great tools, project management tools to do what I do today, I never felt like I belonged in that world. So I never really felt like I had support from management to succeed, if that makes sense. So when it finally came down to it, it really came down to me being able to have a balanced life. I was a single mom at the time. My daughter was 9, and my boss at the time told me that I had to work on another international project. And if anybody knows what that is, basically we're here in Redmond, but yet we're working with countries that have time zones, including like India, with India, with Malaysia, all these different countries that had these time zones. So I was working hours that did not really help me be a parent that was really available for my daughter. And it was starting to really weigh on me and I would ask and say, please, switch me to another project that doesn't have these kind of hours, because I'm really trying to find this balance. And there was just it just wasn't going to happen. So I had to make a choice for my mental health, my being able to parent my child in a way that I could be proud of, and then just also realize that I always wanted to, and I always did in all my jobs, I was a giving back thing. So every holiday, no matter where I worked, I would make sure we'd adopt a family that was struggling for the holidays. We'd who doesn't like to shop for a family? So, gifts and wish lists and all the things. And, if we needed to do a food drive for an organization, I would do that. So I was always doing those type of things wherever I worked. It wasn't part of my job, but it just felt right. And I felt like we needed to get out there in the community and do more stuff. Long story short, if it weren't for that job saying, hey, we're not going to accommodate you, I wouldn't probably be in this seat right here. And I am grateful. There's still a little bit of rejection feelings from that, just because I felt very rejected, like disrespected, and like I felt like I'm a great employee. Why am I not being respected as one? But I also feel like when I did step away from that, it gave me the opportunity to be here today and do what I'm really meant to do. And with some skills I learned along the way, right? So, I think it takes those kind of things sometimes to push us to go in a direction that is more fulfilling for ourselves. And so for that, I'm grateful. And that my daughter, and I had a great conversation back then about, giving back in our community. And here we are. I mean, it just kind of, then I opened myself up to the possibilities, and ideas started coming to the table. And my daughter actually named, she was a big part of naming Girls Giving Back. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because at first I was like, I don't know if I want to call it that. She was like, well, Mom, we're girls, right? And I'm like, you're right, we are. Yeah. So, and then she had friends, and we started doing just community outreach together. And that's really how it all started. And then next thing you know, somebody called me and said, there's this shelter that needs a food drive and a blanket drive. And that's really what opened my eyes to walking into a shelter. It wasn't because of that I was going to do the work that GGB does. It was because I was looking for more outreach for the kids, that I was the girls, the young girls, and I had a nephew involved too at the time. And so it was just kind of looking for those opportunities. And when the shelter did come up, I didn't quite grasp what that meant at the time, but I did when I went in to see the shelter. I realized that they needed more than just food and blankets. And it was a shelter that should have been, in my opinion, knowing the funding that this organization gets, should have been functioning at a high level. And I was just a little shocked by that they were overlooking, and that it was, they weren't taking care of that environment. Everything was broken, everything was dirty, and I thought to myself, this is why my mom didn't ask for help. This is why we didn't end up here. But this doesn't have to be like this. And so I just broke down that in my mind. I walked to that apartment, that 2-bedroom, 1-bath shelter apartment, and I just broke it down in my head about I know exactly what goes into a bathroom. I can put that into a project management tool and have my friend at the time, some of my girlfriends were like, we'll help. And I just told them, here's the color scheme, here's what the bathroom needs, and your kids can do art for the wall of the bathroom. And I just broke it all down. And then we have the kitchen, the living room, all the spaces. And I just reached out to different groups of people and said, do you want to get involved? And it was just so much easier. And again, I also feel like when things are in that right realm of purpose and you have a passion for that, things do flow. So it was a huge eye-opener into where I need to put my energy. And then of course, that's when I met Anita. And she was really that person that sparked me to continue going down that path, which I just did not know. I just wasn't sure, I was very unsure of myself in the sense of what I needed to be doing. I knew what I was doing before wasn't feeling the best. So this was feeling better, but what did that look like in the bigger picture? Do I become a nonprofit? How do I navigate? And then, the science, I think that's the other thing I learned is that when you start asking the questions and don't worry about what that answer is, they show up. And so it's exactly what happened. I mean, I had people show up I invited people to come to the project, and an attorney showed up and said, I'll do the paperwork for your nonprofit. And the one thing I've always been clear about is I'm not spending money on things that are not necessary, that I can't have the community donate, that I can't have, people say, Teresa, you were born in Bellevue. There's a huge assumption of where I come from. I don't come from any wealth at all. But what I did come from is I knew that when I walked into those shelters that everybody has something extra in their house that they could donate. Could be a spatula, could be, a plant, whatever it is, a piece of art. Everybody has something. So we aren't something you wouldn't want in your house. So when I work with any shelter, I'm like, that's our goal. We want this place to be beyond amazing. What does your dream space look like? I want the shelter staff to kind of be part of that dreaming. And even in some of their community spaces that we've built, it's like, they would say things like, oh, we want one of those really cool popcorn machines like the theaters have. Oh, but that's too much. I'm like, no, it's not too much. I mean, you have to dream that. You have to, and of course they have a popcorn machine. I mean, those things matter. Those are, they create an environment that, especially in a community room, I mean, it just brings another vibe in, I mean, who doesn't like the smell of popcorn? Yeah. I mean, some people may not, but I think most people do like the smell of popcorn. So that's just how I've approached it. And I feel like coming from where I come from definitely is a gift in it all, even though, my parents had a hard time because my parents were both alive when I started the organization. They thought it would bring that I was going to embarrass them by telling the family story. And it should never be an embarrassment. It is a piece of me. And I wouldn't have the empathy and compassion I have if I didn't experience what I experienced. I do believe that we're all here to learn, and it's not always going to be the great stuff. Some of it's going to be the tougher things, and that's not a bad thing. When we're raising kids, yes, we want to protect them, but you know what? I can tell you, my daughter, if she was sitting here, would tell you that going to the shelter, her whole childhood was, I mean, not her whole childhood, but from 9 to, till she moved away from home, she's been involved, and she got to, I would let her bring her friends and come, and they would be able to help put the shelter spaces together, and they would learn new things and how to build different furniture. And I mean, but also it gave her compassion for people asking for help, and that she knows that it's okay. It's not a weakness. It's a gift to have these resources out there that we may need. We hope we don't, but if we did, right? And so that's really where why I will always be open to supporting the shelter systems, just because if they want, and I've always done by referral, by the way, I've never gone out to them. They've always come to me if they want that support. But the shelters do talk to each other, and they want to be better. They just don't, before they saw it as an obstacle of something that would cost them money to do. And my whole thing is, no, paint shouldn't even cost you money. I mean, there's donors that will, paint stores that donate paint. So I really try to help them focus on it's important and it's not an expense. And it's just as important as you sitting down with the person that walked in and saying, are you ready to make a change? This space is going to help that, right? It's a piece of that whole puzzle to moving forward. So I'm happy to be part of it.
Yeah. It's wonderful. It's really inspiring to see how, a couple things that I learned from you at least is that it's okay to ask for help, because we often hear stories where, be it teens or even adults, there's a stigma, as you rightly put, they don't want to ask for help. And you've clearly mentioned that it's absolutely okay to ask for help, and you should know the resources where to even go for. And another thing, I also agree, I have few friends that we had this conversation again. It was like, these shelters, they have a common thing, like, oh, they're not safe, they're not clean, they're not that, this and all that. It's difficult for my kids to transition to a space from home and all that. So you're making that transition a bit easier for them. It's okay, it's not bad, it's a safe environment and all that. Another thing I would absolutely loved was involving your kids, involving your daughter and her friends and everybody, because I think the next generation needs to understand that compassion, they should be compassionate, and they should understand, So this is not the only life that you see, right?
Right.
They might not even understand that, or there is another world where we see different people, and we tend to be very protective of our kids. We don't want to expose them to these things. That's what I have seen. Like, people don't want to bring them, because I also volunteer at many places. But what I've seen is I bring my kids. But what I've seen is some people, they don't want to bring their kids to these places, or just show them that there is a world. They might think, oh, this might spoil their childhood and all that. But I absolutely think no.
I think it's a perspective thing, and I've talked a lot about perspective over the years, just because as a single mother, like having my daughter go between two households, which, you know, unfortunately is more common than uncommon, but it's all how we look at those things. So for me, I know my daughter was learning certain things there, certain things with me. We talk about it, and she could then calculate, like even today, she says, you know, I learned from you. Sometimes I thought you were in too loving a relationship with my partner. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, but then my dad is in a more of a vicious, a little bit unhappy relationship. And I said, and the goodness is you get to figure out what works for you. Now, the beautiful thing is she's chosen a loving relationship, and now she gets it a little bit more as an adult. She's like, okay. But I think even in those situations, we can look at being overly protective and being like, we don't want you to see that. But how I look at it is, I want my daughter to be aware of the resources and of all of the different things that go on in family dynamics, friendships, because I can tell you this, your kids will go through friendships that start, sometimes they end. And like anything, it's sad and it's hard for them, and they don't understand it. But the thing is, you don't have complete control of this other person. So you're teaching them, you know, these tools. And I think those things that life is not always going to be, you know, always this beautiful thing. It is going to have challenges, but those challenges can be overcome if you have the tools. If we don't give them the tools, and we don't, I mean, let's just say they have a friend that needs a resource, their family needs help. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I know my daughter's done that. She said, you know, she's said to people, you know, if you want to talk to somebody, here's somebody you can gain some information from. That is the gift. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen to you, but to have that knowledge, I think is also just as important. So I think that perspective, I think people can say, okay, I'm okay with my child, like learning those things, being aware of those things that go out in the world, that happen out in the world. But even in the shelters that my daughter's been in, and again, back to that conversation, I would say, yes, there's a reason why the stigma exists. Even in any industry, there's the businesses that are successful and the ones that are not as successful. This is no different in the shelter industry. There are shelters out there that I definitely would love them to change, that aren't necessarily the safest places. Hence where people get the stories from, because it does exist, just like good and evil. We have both sides, yin and yang, anything you want to call it. So yes, when people call me about resources, I'm very particular on what shelters I feel are higher functioning, that have the safety precautions in place, that have put those things, which I mean, I advocate for all the time. Like, I don't think any shelter should not have safety precautions and make, you know, have open doors where, I mean, they need to be very secure. I mean, these are very vulnerable people. And unfortunately, sometimes that darkness would like to come and impact them wanting to make these changes. So it is important that they do, but not all shelters want to have those. And there is no, I mean, there's emergency, like domestic violence shelters, which are always secure. And then there's the other shelters that sometimes are secure and sometimes are not. I would love to have them all be emergency shelters that are all secure. I know I'm probably not going to be able to change that. I will talk about it though. Shelters that I work in, there is criteria. I'm not going to work with just any shelter that is not willing to make sure that the residents are safe and also have programming in place for recovery. So when I do work with a shelter and they do call, that is the conversation we have. It's not just about me coming in and doing this work to create a different environment. They also have to be a functioning shelter and have programming in place. I talk to them about different programming that they need to have, and if they don't have it, I'm happy to help them get it, like art therapy type programs, exercise, music. Like if they don't have those things, I'm like, how do we create those things in your space? It's really important for recovery. And most of the shelters, the ones that didn't have it, have opened up to that. And I'm like, because they need the support, that to me is an issue, because the community is a huge piece of this. And most people that volunteer in the work that I do are maybe unaware, we'll call it, of why the shelter exists. And it's such an opportunity to educate people. And
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Many people might not even know that something like this exists.
Right.
So it's nice.
Right.
It's good to
Right.
educate them.
Right.
Today, Artist Spotlight is Lavanya Venkateshwar. She is a multidisciplinary artist who's inspired by the beauty of nature. Lavanya's unique work blends vibrant acrylic and oil paintings with a delicate crochet elements, creating truly one-of-a-kind pieces. Her passion extends beyond her art, as she generously donated many pieces to women's shelter, aiming to bring comfort and connection to those in need. Through her art, Lavanya celebrates beauty, resilience, and the strength found in nature and community. We are thrilled to spotlight this talented artist, Lavanya Venkateshwar, and share her inspiring story in today's episode.